As that gets going, I want to remind everybody that this is streaming and that it will be recorded. Megan has done a great job making sure that all the recordings are nice and easy to find on our website now. And I personally have had a lot more people asking for links and that sort of thing, so I'm really happy with it does seem like it's increasing the ability for people to be able to see what we do, so I'm really happy about that. But just as a reminder to speak up as best you can, and if anybody from the audience is doing any sort of protracted explanation, to kind of come up right around in here. They can't hear basically behind those tables. So if you're going to talk for a little while, freeze up here. All right, so I'm going to get this started. Welcome, everybody. Our upcoming meetings, I'm not going to declare a quorum because we're not doing any business tonight, it's just a workshop. But I do want to remind people that we have 2 more scheduled workshops for the budget on March 23rd and March 30th at the same time and the same location. We don't necessarily have to use the 3rd one, but traditionally we generally have. For people watching, and just to remind ourselves, generally what we do is we get the initial draft budget presentation tonight. We talk about it. We think about questions that we want answered. Those questions, we generally call those parking lot questions. We're not looking for an answer necessarily right this second. They might require some data to be gathered or some people to be consulted. Then usually in the second workshop, we go through those sort of parking lot questions, make sure all those get answered, right? We try not to play 20 questions, right? At this point, we want to be asking questions that are substantive and will affect the budget process. And then usually in that last workshop, we kind of iron out any lingering issues that we're not sure on, or things that came up, or, it might be at a number we don't like as a board or whatever. We might ask, okay, what would it look like a little bit less? But we try not to make busy work, right? If we're asking people to go make a substantial change to the budget, it's because we've got a good reason. It's not just like, well, what would it look like with 1% less? Because it's a lot of work. So we want to, make sure that our questions are focused and or to some point of discussion. All right, so why don't we start with the new business? And the first thing is the budget draft presentation. And I don't think you're going to go through the line item by line item, but for people who haven't checked their email lately, we do have a first draft line item by line item in our email box, which is 76 pages. I don't expect you to have read it this morning. I mean, in the last 20 minutes. So that's not what we're doing. We're not going line by line. This is more of a big picture thing. And I will pass it over to whoever is it. Is it ready to start? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say before I start that oftentimes I feel a little bit guilty with some of these presentations. An example is this one, because if you're the director of operations and finance, the budget is your life 12 months a year, whereas other administrators, it might be only 6 months a year. And so Diane has done an extraordinary job working with the administrative team, one-on-one time with every administrator in the district, communication with every vendor we work with, just an extraordinary amount of work that she does to ensure that we're getting the best prices possible, the best projections possible, the best warranties possible, and the best numbers possible for you to look at. So I'm happy to do this presentation, but I think 80% of the hard work and toil is definitely Diane. Thank her for that. The budget presentation is fairly simple and straightforward. Maggie did send to you the larger phone book size budget by email for you to look at. And after this meeting, this presentation will be posted on our website. And our website has a designated budget area that any member of the community can go look at. And everything that we do between now and referendum regarding the budget will be posted on the website after each meeting or workshop. So it's out there for people to look at. I'm going to stand in front of you for a minute. We won't be offended from this. Okay, so this is our proposed budget for 2022-23. So our constituency, we thought about this one. You know, we made this sort of a big philosophical question, and we came to the conclusion that our constituency are the school-age children of MSAD 15. That's why we exist, and this is who we serve. So the budget, the foundation of the budget is based on three things. One is essential program and services funding formula. That is the amount of money that is the recommendation by the State Department of Education. That is the minimal you need to operate your program. It's to ensure that there's a minimal level of educational funding for every school district in Maine. The other piece is the MSAD 15 strategic plan. The school district has identified major goals that it likes to accomplish over a long period of time. Some of those are cost neutral, some are expensive, and then everything in between. So we take into consideration what we're looking to accomplish from our strategic plan that might have budget implications. And then broadly speaking, the achievement of the Maine learning results. What are all the academic and other indicators that we want all our students to know and understand by the time they graduate from high school? So these are the three things that are the foundation upon which our budget is built. And the school board philosophy is to provide a high quality education to all students in a fiscally responsible manner. The budget proposal is built on the assumption that all students will be in school in person for the entirety of school year 2022-2023. Thought long and hard whether or not I wanted that slide in there, and I decided I did want that slide in there because we've learned over the last 2 years that it's hard to predict what will happen. But our plan is we will be in school every day all next year. This as well, I thought this is a new slide that we've never presented to you before, and it gets back to the essential programs and services EPS funding model. There are optimum and not so optimum situations within your school district that affect your ability to build a school budget. MSAD 15 is experiencing decreased enrollment while simultaneously experiencing significant property value increases. So for a long time, this school district and many school districts in Maine had been in the optimal area, low valuation and a lot of students. That's the optimal to have. And for a long time, that was the case in this part of the state. As you know, over the last decade, York County, Cumberland County has seen more suboptimal situations. The evaluations are increasing while there's lower student enrollment. And the reason the high valuation is difficult is when you have a high valuation or an increasing valuation in your school district, the state interprets that as you have more ability to pay for your schools. And so that's where you are right now. It's a different place than we were 10 years ago. And so as we get to enrollments, these are the enrollments of our school
which school is this? I don't,
Memorial.
is it Memorial? It doesn't. Oh, could you go back?
I don't know why it's Memorial.
All right, so Memorial, this is Memorial. So this year, this is how many students actually showed up the first day of school at Memorial. This is in 2021. This is I'm sorry.
Action.
Yeah, that's how many students actually showed up the first day of school last August at Memorial. It's 152 students. What we project for the coming school year at Memorial is 156 students. The actual for 2022 is 166 students, and projected for next year is 173 students. At the Russell School, the actual number of students that showed up for 2021 is 226. Projected for fiscal year 2022 is 220 students. The actual for 2022 is 210 students. And then next year, they're anticipating 205.
This is Dunn School.
This is Dunn School, and Dunn School has been up and down. It was a little perplexing, trying to figure out. They were probably the most affected by the family stability caused by COVID. And maybe kids going to live with their grandparents for a year, or going to live someplace else, or moving for a year. Dunn School seemed to be the one that was affected the most. So the actual was 308 for 2021. Projected for 2022 is 343. The actual number that showed up was 326. And for the coming school year, we're projecting 340 students. And
Middle school.
the middle school, again, these were projected because we did have a bubble working our way through the middle school. The actual for 2021 was 518 students. Projected for 2022 was 494. The actual that showed up was 493. And for next year is 2023. So I would say that our projections and our actual enrollees is, we have probably been the most accurate with the middle school. We've been able to track the trends and follow the enrollments. And then the high school, the actual number of students in 2021 was 584. The projected for 2022 was 581. We had 607 arrive. We have some students in Raymond that have choice, and we had a larger than expected number of students who chose to come to our school. Very pleased about that. And our projected for next year is 603, I'm sorry, was that 4? 604 students. Okay, and then back to the enrollment, and it gets back to my optimum and suboptimum funding formula. In 2012-13, we had 2,047 students enrolled in the school district. And what we're projecting for our school district in 2022 is 1,800 students. And so you have in our district a difference of 247 students over that time period. And so that does affect some of your funding formula. There were a number of factors that affected this. Many of the housing starts in this area were condominiums, not the kind of places that have a lot of children. You had the charter school area, charter schools more student choice. And so that has affected your enrollment, our enrollment for the last 10 years or so. So the proposed budget summary, 2021-22 budget was $28,485,603. What we are proposing tonight for 2022-23 is $30,235,628, which is a dollar increase of $1,750,025, a 6.14 increase. That is the largest increase you've had since 2014-15, the largest increase in 8 years. There are a number of inflationary factors. Over the 10 years, you've done a really good job. We didn't put the slide up this year, but did we? No.
The history.
Yeah, so we do have a slide that we can share with you that you've seen, I think, every year except this year.
Oh, it's completed.
Oh, then I'll wait till we
Future
get there.
Presentations, they will say to come.
There are future presentations. However, I think the history of the budgets that we've had in this school district over the last 10 or 12 years have been pretty conservative, normally 2.8, 3.5% increases. This is a departure from the past.
Nothing set in stone yet.
Oh, nothing said, so this is a proposed. And there are some factors that are not cemented yet, so, yeah. Okay, so what is driving our budgets? So we have the existing staff that we have today. Based on the collective bargaining agreements and our salary scales, there would be a $566,191 increase. We, as of this afternoon, we still do not have from Anthem what our insurance will be. We know there will be an increase. Diane has put a 10% placeholder, so that could be any number up to there. This is merely a placeholder, but that placeholder would increase $548,960. There is a proposal from the technology department to buy switches, repairs, staffing, wiring, cameras, work that needs to be done to upgrade and improve our technology infrastructure. That's $172,017. As a result of the pandemic, and as a result, consequent, the subsequent problems we had getting substitute teachers this year, we were able to get permanent substitute teachers. And the concept of a permanent substitute teacher is they're non-bargaining, they're not on the contract, they get paid long-term sub rate, they do get some benefits, but that person is assigned to the school all year long. And so you don't have to worry about finding a sub at the last minute. You know someone's going to show up every day and you have someone to assign. So there is a proposal for 5 of those positions at $222,740. We do have a projected bump in the enrollment at Memorial. We think that the kindergarten may well increase, and we do like to keep our student enrollments for the kindergarten 1, 2, and 3 grade somewhere in the 17 student range, the ratio of 1 teacher to 17 students for K 1, 2, 3 for reading instruction, math instruction to get them off to a good start. If the projections hold true, that number will be a ratio of 1 to 23. So there is a proposal for a 1-year teacher to change that ratio for this coming school year. And speaking with the building principal and others around enrollment, this is something we would revisit every year while they're in that K-1-2 grade level. So we're on a cusp of increased enrollment there. Next slide, please. Tuition reimbursement, that is governed by the collective bargaining agreement. Teachers and other people in the support staff contract are eligible to take 2 graduate courses a year, plus books at the tuition rate of the Graduate School of Education at the University of Maine at Orono. Those tuition rates have increased, and so there is a bump there. Library furniture for Dunn and Memorial School would be an increase of $24,500. Stipend contracts for stipends, again, within the collective bargaining agreement. The stipends are attached to the collective bargaining agreement, so the stipend salaries will increase as well. You've discussed the Athletic Hall of Fame as a way to honor people who have done great things for our school department on a volunteer basis. And that would be a $17,950 expenditure. That also includes some sheds being constructed and our new agreement on the Libby Hill Trail, supporting Libby Hill Trail in kind and with a payment to help support our kids that use that facility. Our school resource officer, this used to be almost fully grant funded through a federal grant in conjunction with the town of Gray. That grant has ended, and so our contribution now to support the school resource officer would be a $20,985 increase. We have really maximized our advertising. We have, as you know, many unfilled positions. We have used all sorts of electronic communication and print communication to really do our best to recruit people to work for us. So that has been a $5,000 increase. Mechanical systems, the HVAC system contract would be an increase of $35,000. Our liability insurance increase of $13,500. This is the pinch that the whole country is feeling, and so the projection is that will increase by $117,950. We think that there are ways to use fuel stabilization, but there's a lot of information there yet to know. Electricity, we have been involved in the solar projects, but for a number of reasons that hasn't come to fruition yet, but it will in the future. That's an increase of $16,500. Getting a new van, new bus with a 3-year lease purchase with the Maine Department of Education. And then the high school roof repair right out here by the lunch area. We've had some serious leaks, and that will cost us $15,000 this summer to do a high quality repair. And then the Dunn Middle School has gone without new supplies. They are able to maximize what they got through the ESSER grants. So this is coming back online. And then Power School, which is our student data management system, is an increase of $8,937. The decreases, there is good news. By restructuring the special ed department and shifting some of those expenses over to ESSER, that will take $22,647 out of the local budget. You have one of your long-term debts is now come off the books. And so that provides you $40,125 in reduction. Outside placements, there are a number of students with special needs who we don't have the capacity to serve in the school, so we send them to specialty schools away. That will be a reduction of $31,800. The bus lease, again, we've paid off the bus lease, those 3-year purchase lease agreements. That will reduce your expenditure by $62,905. Day One is a program we've been working with for 2 full years now. And the funding formula has changed over the last year. It's a bit complicated because the students don't stay all year. They come and they go as needed. But we see a savings on that of $53,385, and then a reduction in workers' comp insurance of $11,968. So possible budget adjustments. So here are the 2 things. We don't know what the health insurance is going to be, and that's a big number. 1% difference is a big difference. So, 1% of $54,000, $540,000 insurance increase, 1 or 2% makes a huge difference. And then, as I referenced earlier, the fuel stabilization fund with the state of Maine may help provide some relief with our heating oil costs. Okay. So the proposed budget summary. So if we go through 2000, this is sort of a compare and contrast sheet. The 2021-22 budget and the proposed 22-23 budget calls for a $1,750,025 increase. Compare and contrast on the adult education, we have not we are still making decisions on this. Presentation was made by the adult ed director to the finance committee. There are some questions about whether or not our position is to increase some of the funding from the local level for adult education. And that would make a 6.14% increase if you were to do this budget proposal unchanged. Our estimated revenue, the only thing we have that is truly solid for our revenue, and I say solid with a small s, is our ED 279. Said for last year's aid, we got $11,337,804 from the Maine Department of Education to fund our schools. This year, we will receive $11,222,167. That's a decrease of $115,637. The district fund balance, oftentimes school boards will use their fund balance to help use as a revenue source to build their budget. Last year, the school board used $1.3 million of its fund balance to create the budget. And this is an assumption again, will the school board choose to use $1,300,000 of the fund balance to as revenue for this budget? We have miscellaneous district revenue. That's increased substantially from $113,000 to $316,000. And one reason is I believe we got 9 students more from Raymond than we anticipated, and they pay tuition. They pay the state tuition. So that was a substantial increase in revenue. Day One state funding. So the $195,000. So the funding piece is a little complicated for Day One, and it's in flux. It's still changing. So the revenue we got confirmed from the state last year was $195,000. This year, we will be receiving $117,739 based on their new funding approach to serving these students. And then the additional local required. So what our local taxpayers voted at referendum last year was to fund our school districts. Their contribution was $16,111,481. What this proposal asks is for $17,352,722 from the two municipalities, and that would show an increase of $1,241,241. Now, as you recall, yes, now as you recall last year, the ED, and this is why I say the the ED 279 is solid with a small s. Last year, we got our ED 279 report, and the school board built a budget based on that funding recommendation. And we went through the entire budget process. You had the workshops, you made your decisions. We had the budget validation process with the public, and then the public voted at referendum. And then after that happened, the Maine Department of Education sent revised ED 279, which gave us the ability to have just under $1 million. And so the school board really had to decide what they wanted to do with that money. And they had three choices. One choice was to choose not to levy those taxes at the municipalities, to spend the money, or to do a third option of perhaps put it in a capital reserve, what have you. What this school board decided to do was reduce the amount of money that we were asking the two municipalities to levy in property tax. And so that accounted for a little over half of that extra $1 million we got. And that leaves $498,000 that has not been allocated by this school board. However, by June 30 of this year, the school board will have to determine how it wants to allocate the use of that money. And that's a conversation for later on in this budget process. Next slide. So the estimated tax impact in gray, it's $954,700 increase from last year to this year. Speaking with the town of Gray as recently as yesterday, their indication is that this will have a minimal tax rate effect. In New Gloucester, it would be a $286,521 increase from 21-22, which would mean 47 increase on the total mill rate, or 3.4%. And for a family that owns a $200,000 home, this would be an increase of $94 attributed to the school budget. The ED 279 valuation, 3-year average for Gray. So the valuation, what is determined to be the value of all the property in the town of Gray, the 3-year average increase has been 7.9%. And for the town of New Gloucester, the value of all their real estate and property would be a 6.4% increase over the last 3 years. And combined of both municipalities, a 7.4% increase, or an increase in value of $117,033,333. And then your timeline as we work through the budget process: March 23, budget workshop; March 30, budget workshop. If needed, we use this as a placeholder. We always have an extra one. If you have a complicated budget year, if you have a lot of questions or a lot of research, then we have this one. Some years you use it, some you don't. May 4, the school board signs the warrants for the budget articles. May 19, we have the budget validation meeting. It's the town meeting that's held at the high school. Every citizen who is a registered voter is entitled to attend and participate in that meeting. Then June 14, the budget referendum will take place where all registered voters in the two towns can vote on the budget. And then the following day, if that budget passes, the school board convenes and votes on accepting the results of the budget referendum. And so we have clarifying questions and we have parking lot questions. So I guess the difference between the two is the clarifying question is, if there's a little nuance you have, then that's fine. Or if there's a parking lot question that requires a lot of research or going to dig out some more information, we can do that as well too and bring it back to the next workshop. Sam?
Thanks, Greg.
Oh, sorry, the ESSER piece?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's go to the ESSER piece.
Slide, slide.
Okay, so we've had 3 major grants from the federal government, acts of the Congress that have given money to public schools to support them for the disruption and disturbances in trying to maintain public schools during COVID. So the first one is the ESSER 1 grant, and we received $261,770 for that in the fall of, oh, I'm sorry, the third column is when that grant expires, correctly? I'm sorry. So this money needs to be expended and accounted for by September 30, 2022. And ESSER 2 is our second grant, and $1,082,384, and those have to be expended by the end of September 2023. And then our ESSER 3 grant, $2,430,880 on 2024. And so our total federal grants for COVID relief is $3,775,034. Now, the use of those ESSER grants, because I know that school board members and school administrators have gotten a lot of phone calls and emails saying, why don't you use this money for this? Or why don't you use this money for that? Why don't you build a new wing or what have you? So there is a general rule for all these ESSER grants. You have to use these dollars that mitigate problems caused by COVID. So for example, a lot of teachers had to learn how to teach remotely. So we used that money for professional development to train teachers on how to use the OWL to teach in class and at home at the same time. So we don't have a carte blanche on how to use these dollars. They are to be used to, in any way, shape, or form that reduces the impact caused by COVID. And so some of the things that you did were, we have 2 general education social workers. We understood that a lot of our families and a lot of our students would be impacted socially by the pandemic. So we felt using those dollars during the pandemic was a good idea. So we have these 2 social workers. The same thing with the nurses. We had to do, we had to really monitor the health of our students. We had to really monitor the health of our staff. And we had to do pool testing. We had to communicate a lot with families. So the board approved of bringing on another school nurse using ESSER funds. We had to increase our summer learning for students for lost learning. We built outside classrooms because that very first year of the pandemic, we are under very strict guidelines for social distancing. However, by moving instruction outside, it eliminated a lot of those problems. So we built some high quality outside classroom and outside teaching areas, so we use money for that. PPE, safety. PPE is the masks, specialty masks for students, rubber gloves, gauzes, rubbing alcohol, all these materials that we use to prevent the spread of the virus. And classroom supplies increased quite a bit. So we had many students who were learning at home. And so do they need crayons? Do they need pencils? Do they need pens? Do they need rulers? All sorts of materials that they normally would get at school, we had to provide both at school and at home. And so we used our ESSER funds for that as well. Summer curriculum work. So one of the things we did was normally we have teachers come in for 2 days in the summer before the kids arrive. Last year, we had 4 because we knew that the teachers had to re-up, they had to broaden their skills, they had to be prepared for schools 5 days a week and what that might mean and changes. So we had paid for that using the ESSER funds. Technology hotspots, Zoom. We had many families that did not have access to the internet. They simply didn't have the internet hookups in their house, or they were in a black area where there just really wasn't good internet connection in the part of town that they happened to live. So Megan Doyle and her staff and Shonda identified who are these families that do not have internet access. And we made sure that all those children had internet access using these hotspots. And then the HVAC system, which is always an expensive proposition. And it qualified for the ESSER grant because what it does is it improves the quality of the air, the ventilation of the air. And ESSER said that that was okay to use grant dollars because of improving air quality in the school would mitigate the spread of the virus. A lot of different types of staff support. And then we got new kitchen equipment because the work of the cafeteria staff really changed. Not only were they preparing meals for school, they were preparing meals for home, which really required them to have some better equipment and tools to do that job. Again, clarifying questions and parking lot questions. So those, if you could go back to the original ones, please, Diane, of what we bought with the ESSER funds. So as the grants come offline over the next 3 years, the decisions that the administrators are going to have to make, and finally the school board are going to have to make when COVID goes away, when the ESSER grants go away, will there still be a need for those 2 social workers that we paid for with ESSER grants? I've asked the administrators, we have one of those social workers doing secondary schools and one doing elementary schools. They are keeping meticulous notes of what their workday looks like, how many students they're serving, what kind of services they're provided. So we'll be able to quantify for you what they are doing and if and why we would want to continue them after the grants close. The same thing with the nursing staff. We brought in a new RN. Will we still want that RN as supervisor of health services? Shonda is keeping very close track of what the nurses do, why they do it, how many students they serve, in what capacity. And so we're going to need to talk about that as the ESSER grants come offline. And this is true of all these items that we've been paying for with the ESSER grant. We're going to have to be in a position to say, you know, as administrators, there are several things here we simply don't need anymore. But there may be 1 or 2 things that we say, you know, even though the pandemic is over, there is good reason maybe to continue these. This isn't for decision tonight, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind that these are decisions that are going to have to be made over the next year or 2 on what we have purchased with those ESSER grants. Then again, If you have a nuanced question, just a question about detail, we could probably answer that tonight. If you have a more in-depth question that requires a little bit of research on the administrator's part, we call those parking lot questions. We'll take your questions, go do our research and bring it back to you at the next workshop.
Great. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of thoughts on going forward. Mostly I want our discussion to focus on expenses for obvious reasons, but my clarifying questions are around how the math works on the projected tax increases that you put up. Can we talk about that, or is it too soon?
I call the town. I don't determine it myself. So I call the town and ask them how that worked, what that number would be. I tell them the estimate and they predict what the formula.
Yeah, but I don't, not that I don't trust the town offices, but it's hard to understand how it's like a 7.7% raw increase in what we would be asking from the towns. How does that get so?
So
low?
I think that Ray has had a tax rate and they, as Craig said, the budgets were voted. This number information came in after that we received additional funds. They still continue to set the tax rate on what the original budget was for this current year. So they have fund balance to offset taxes this year. Going forward, I believe is what they're saying. So they do not believe that what we propose today may have any tax impact.
So, right, so well, we're not talking about what our tax impact would be. We're talking about our tax impact in addition to what they're planning to do with the town would equal this.
I'm not sure what the town is estimating for their tax impact on the town side.
Right.
The school department's budget, I do not believe, I can't tell you specifically. It's something that we would have to, it's not something we determine. Their estimates of what we determine. I called New Gloucester, said, what is this impact? I mean, they really have a formula that says 700,000 or $7 million raises, $1 on the tax rate. Something like that is, I don't know if it is that anymore.
Right.
So
Okay.
I don't know. if it has
I
any-
guess we
it's
can worry about
complicated.
that later, I guess.
Yeah, it's not something that we should even adjust right now because we don't know what our final
Right,
budget is, and I don't want to get the community saying
Yeah,
that, I don't
okay.
want them to get them focused on what a tax rate increase will be at this point.
I agree with that.
So
it seemed-
that's my concern
yeah.
at that point.
It
at this
seemed a little black box.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're
Yeah,
gonna,
it's always in the back of our mind and what the impact on the budget is. I
Right.
mean, we have to be thoughtful of that and transparent about that, but it can't be our first decision on how we set a
No.
budget.
just wanted to clarify on that.
Yeah.
One parking lot question I have, that could be a clarifying question, if you know what off the top of your head, is how much we have left in ESSER funds? We know what we spend it on, but have we
Yeah.
spent them all, or is there
Nope.
some
And-
left, or,
So,
like I said. we're not
I
gonna
can
start
briefly
right now.
tell you, the ESSER one, which is about 261,000, is pretty much expended.
Yeah.
It will be at the end of this year. Obviously, it expires the end of September of 2022. For ESSER two, it is $1,082,000. We have committed most of that. There is still a little bit of wiggle room in that, but we have committed most of that. Some of it will be used this summer and some will be used next year, but we committed most of that. As far as ESSER three, that is something that we have to, it's 2 million for, a little over 2 million for, and we have to review it every 6 months. We have planned for most of it. We've spent very little of it. We have not touched that part yet. I think we've spent under $10,000 of it, if that. There are
That's
some
the
projects in
HVAC
there.
Project is most of it, right?
Excuse me?
The HVAC project is most of it?
Yeah. That, and we're still waiting to hear how much that will be. We only planned about 500,000. I believe that's going to be more. So we're really cautious about spending that grant until we know more about that and how we adjust the grant. One of the things that we are spending this year on that is the IEP coordinators. That is in the ESSER three budget. But some of the things, the items, it's so not black and white, that some of the things for each grant are all 3 years. So we can use it for 3 years before it expires. So maybe social workers for 2 years out of one of the grants and the 3rd year out of the next grant. So I have the budget and it will be posted at some point, but ESSER 3 is very fluid at this point. So we really have not spent any, we spent very minimal of that. ESSER 2 is pretty committed and ESSER 1 is pretty much done. There's 30,000 left and we know some of the items that we need to buy with that 30,000 to complete that based on what we had written our grant on. So anytime we change and we go away from what the grant is, we have to rewrite the grant and get it approved again to make those changes. But ESSER 3, we are committed to bringing that to the community every 6 months to revisit, revise if needed. So that will come up in June.
This is also another question I had for the board. We all just got in our email the 76-page line-by-line thing. Some of us have more and less facility with reading things like that. Would it be a benefit for the board to have Diane go through how to read that quickly, or does everybody feel like they know how to read that? Making sure.
And I'd also
It's pretty
be glad,
straightforward, right?
yeah, but I'd also be glad to meet with anybody individually if they want, you know, to spend 15, 20 minutes with me and go through and review the appropriation reports.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure everybody was comfortable. All right, so I saw Jason.
I appreciate that.
Maybe this is just a clarifying question.
Yeah.
The health right now, for
Yeah.
the increase for the health,
Mhm.
we have a placeholder.
Yeah.
I think 10%.
Yeah.
Increase, is that estimating higher? Do we feel like we're estimating for close to where we are? I know it's tough to. Yeah.
So probably within the next week to 10 days, I'll have a range. So what they do is they usually give you a range of a high and low. They give us our experience rating. I thought we were pretty decent. They didn't think we were as decent as I thought. We're certainly under 1, I think we're under 8. So we could be the middle of the pack, maybe to the lower of the pack. I think 10% is high, but I have no idea how they're going to be impacted by COVID and what we're going to be. I mean, by the next meeting, I should be able to tell you the range. Approximately 1% is $37,000. So it's significant. If we, you know, when you see that number of 568 or whatever that number was, that includes changes to health plans that employees took. It's not just the increase. So, you know, through the year, people make changes. We also have open enrollment and have to adjust to that, that they can go from a, you know, any type of plan that they want to a different one every year. So, but the 10% is approximately $37,000 of what we currently have. And I really don't have a feeling. I thought I would be on the lower end, but I really, they're keeping it pretty close to the gun. They haven't shared that information yet.
Thank you.
Garrett?
I hope this is clarifying, maybe a parking lot. Do you know what the open the door percentages versus 6.14 includes some changes? If we made no change, I'm just curious what it cost to open the doors. with
Well,
no changes.
yeah.
And
and I can get back to you. There's very little changes. I can tell you, you know, when we go back and look at, you know, the 600 first 2 line items, that's $1 million. And then you put in utilities and heat and oil, electricity, things like that. And then take off some of those debt service and the things that are definitely coming down, such as day one and other items. I can certainly go back and try to give you that number, what that looks like. I don't know off the top of my head.
But we're really looking, there's not much of a gap between open doors and what's being proposed.
No,
So it's not, if we're looking at what's changed, it's really a small amount of actual change in that.
yeah, and if you,
I
you
mean,
know,
if
I mean,
if you do salary plus the healthcare, that's $1 million.
Right.
And then the heating oil and the electricity is 150. And then the, what's the other big one in there?
I think that,
Yeah, so like you're talking, like the actual asks are under.
So I just think it's important, if only for the public's sake, to make that point.
Yeah.
That we're looking, the initial run through the budget is 6.14, but even at that number, there's very little in there that isn't open to
Contractually obligated
Right.
or costs outside of our.
I think
That
there's
doesn't include a whole
significant
lot.
ones that you have that are not, are your permanent subs.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't even put memorial teacher in there necessarily. I think that would be the biggest thing that you have flexibility on. As far as technology, you know, cameras and wiring switches and, you know, really that's not something that's a, you know, want, it's
Yeah.
something you need. I don't think that that's, you know, we need to do that. Could you possibly delay putting new furniture in Dunn School or putting new library shelves in Memorial School? Yeah, stipends is contract, tuition is contract. You know, Hall of Fame, that's $8,500.
Well, that's the whole.
You know, so there, you know, property insurance, you can't change that, heating fuel. Could we get away without buying a new bus? I really need 2 buses. I, you know, put in 1 bus.
So my point was
But,
just
you
that,
know.
6.14 sounds like a lot compared to past years. But there's really almost nothing in there that's in addition to what we've done in past years. So
It really is.
it's all stuff that, well, inflation right now is at 7. It's all stuff that we really are not controlling. So it's not as big a number as that feels. It's not really a scary number. And it's not like decided to buy a lot of stuff. or change a lot of stuff. Okay.
I was wondering, Diane, the van and the bus, which I think we need, I'm not questioning that, but have you considered getting all electric?
So I'm gonna give you a brief answer on that. It's a little more involved. So we traditionally had all diesel buses and
Oh,
we
I know
have,
that.
in the past years, we've switched to gas buses. More efficient for us, easier to get, run cleaner. No, they are pushing electric a little bit in the state. I believe there's only 1 school district in the entire state that has even started to go to electric. It's very involved and they're not easily attainable. There is starting to be more talk on it, but not one single district has really made that decision to move in that direction for many, many reasons. And we're just learning all those reasons. We're meeting with the vendors. The transportation departments are all getting together. They're meeting with vendors to share that information with them. It's very involved to do that. Like we couldn't just do that. You have to have the capacity to turn them on and everything
You
else.
gotta
We don't
the
even have
mechanics
that.
who know how to work on it.
Right. And we don't even, you know, even for our buses in the winter, the diesel buses have to be turned on. We don't even have the capacity to turn ours on. And that's why we have to send them home with our drivers to turn them on at home, plug them in at home so that they're ready to go and don't freeze up in the winter time. So I think electricity for buses, electrical buses are pretty far off. EV buses are pretty
Oh, I was
far
just
off for us.
I mean, one of the, I think, didn't we do the analysis on our routes and with, at current battery capacity for electric buses, they could not complete
Okay.
our routes
That
in
makes
a
sense.
day.
It's one of the bus companies here in the state, was just a promotional piece. It was a couple of days ago, they're doing an extended test with 3 buses they're getting on a grant.
Yes.
To see if they'll even hold up in our winters.
That is another concern.
That's a big thing, yeah. You can, like, I know in my hybrid, I lose like 25% of my miles per gallon in the winter versus the summer. Like, that would be a rough surprise. We had super
Right.
cold
Yes.
January.
So there's a lot of challenges to overcome before it's something that we could, the direction. we could go.
Thank you.
It's kind of-
It's a really good question. It's not there yet.
So a parking lot question, I think it would be good for us to understand what our general fund balance is and what the trend line for that has been, right? So if it's 1.3 million last year, 1.3 million this year, you know, what percentage of our general fund does that leave us with? You know, just, you know, we haven't really looked at what that general fund is that we're carrying over year to year in a while. I think that would be a good thing to have at the next workshop. Unless you just.
I mean, we've been traditionally maintaining around $2 million in our fund balance. We've been fortunate in the last couple of years. I mean, we were able to offset taxes by about $600,000 to $800,000 a year.
Right.
Over the last few years, we've increased it. Last year was the most at $1.3 million. We were able to save revenue, save expenses and money because of using the ESSER funds or the CRF funds and capitalizing on those. This year, I anticipate that we will continue only because we had additional revenue from homeless students that we, state agency client students that we have, and then the additional tuition that we had not planned on from Raymond students. So, and as well, continuing to maximize ESSER funds and the end of the CRF fund. So I do anticipate that we'll have a fund balance at the end of the year. We certainly can review what it is, but we have been able to maintain, it's been higher than 2. We're down to 2 million right now, right around there. It's been a little bit higher over the last few years. So, but I can certainly do
I
a
just think it
history
would-
on that.
I just want to make sure, it sounds, hey, we'll do 1.3 million like we did last year. I just want to make sure we're not.
Well,
robbing a big
and-
bank or, like,
The state increased the amount that schools can have, realizing that they need to have fund balance to have cash flow, to be able to offset quite a bit. So prior, the state allowed you to have 3%. For the next 3 years, they're allowing me to have 9%, and then they're gonna flatline it at 5%. So they realize that districts need to be able to build up fund balance and have that fund balance to, in their back pocket to just pay your bills.
Yeah.
So, but I will give you that. Yep, I'll get that information for you. It's not something I have.
right, yeah, I didn't expect it. That's what I just think it would be good.
I do have my audit with me, so I, I can give you
Just so the
some
people that
information,
see it.
but I don't have the history.
That's a lot of money to roll over. Um,
Yeah, it's very, just, sorry, but, to be able to offset taxes by $1.3 million is very
That's what I'm
significant.
saying, it's a lot of money.
And to be able to maintain that is not something that, we don't want to do that. We really don't, we're not in the business of raising taxes to hold it and, we don't need to raise taxes if we don't need to. So it's not really where we want to be. We'd like to not have much carryover.
Right, I mean,
So-
ideally, we're not taking anything from
Right.
our general fund bond. That's why I want to look at it, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to set up some perpetual cycle where we're depending on that revenue.
Exactly. We want to get out of that.
Yeah. Any other? That's probably more about it. So can we, I think a parking lot question would be to understand the dynamics of the elementary schools, right? So if we have Russell going in one direction and Memorial going in the other direction, and we need a teacher at Memorial, is there any chance that we can do some sort of load balancing so
Yes.
that, I don't know the answer right now, but it seems like there might be a way, to see if some kids that are right on the line want to come over to Russell or whatever. It might be good to understand those dynamics.
And we always have that conversation, is it something we talked about, this week, redistricting? Is it something that we can look at the elementary schools and make sure we're maximizing capacity and not overloading one of the schools or having to hire new staff? We might have some openings at other schools. And then we also have some families that ask, and we have a little more flexibility in some years than we do in other years to be able to allow that to happen. So, but we can certainly share with you in more detail how we process that decision.
Also, and again, I know it's super complicated, so this is definitely a parking lot question. Still, I'm not quite understanding the day one dynamic, right? So it was, right, it seemed to be that day one was gonna be better, but then when we showed the revenue side, it seemed like it was worse. So I think just something that looks at nothing but money in and money out for day
Yeah,
one.
I'll be glad. Yeah, I
I
think
think-
that's great. I'll be
I
glad. to-
don't understand it.
Yeah.
It
I'll be glad to-
can't be the only one.
And part of that
Because I really
is-
love that program. I just want to make sure I truly
Yeah,
understand.
and part of it is due to the funding method that the state has used and our budgeting of those funds. And how that impacts the budget going forward with the change that they are adopting at the state level. That really was the way it should have been a long time. But so I will do a budget sheet for you and show you how that is working.
Another parking lot question, I sort of hesitate to ask this question because I don't want to cause trouble. But the union doesn't have a problem with permanent subs. Like, it seems kind of like we're hiring.
So,
I mean, I just don't want to, set us up for something in the future. I mean, I know the question seems weird, but
if anything, they've been happy for it, because what's, especially during COVID, what's happened is pulling people from their planning period, pulling people from their lunch break, pulling people. So it kind of relieves that problem. Although there is nothing to stop them at the next contract time saying, hey, we want to look at this. Yeah. And again, that is an ask, it's a proposal. We can go back and get you a little more data on why and how, and I can find out a little more if there are ramifications in terms of CBA.
It's not uncommon, it's happening all the time, so.
right,
Other school districts are doing it also.
I think it's a great idea, support it. I just want to make sure no one's gonna, because theoretically, we could just keep adding permanent subs. At some point, I would be salty.
Well, we haven't eliminated any FTEs in doing it. These are totally adds. They're not a substitute for. There's no classroom that they're permanently installed.
I know, I'm just saying, if I were the teachers union, I would say, well, we need 5 more teachers in this district. I'm just
I'll be
making
good- I'll
sure.
be good
that-
luck.
And I used to.
We've got a union rep. That's what I would be arguing. So just
Well,
making
I
sure.
was a union rep,
Right.
and I think it's a great thing to have a substitute in each building. It relieves so much stress. And I talked to my dear daughter, who's a team leader in the system. And she's on her way to school, and she says, oh God, Mom, I've got 3 teachers out today. What am I gonna do? And they have to get their own sense of things. And it's like, okay, how can I spread my staff so thin that they don't have lunch, they don't have a prep period, they can't get this, they can't get that. So, no, I think it's an excellent investment, and I think we appreciated our summer deal very much. Just saying.
It just, I think that we certainly, we probably should just at least have some conversations over the things in this budget that are significant increases that are controlled. Salaries and benefits, contractual, health insurance contractual. Maybe a little bit more information on the technology line.
Yeah, that's,
And I think that we should talk about for itself, just like, I asked Diane, I said, what does a sub do if there's no teachers?
They find stuff.
And are they, well, I mean, are subs, permanent subs, registered teachers, they have their teaching certificates or?
So they have basic credential, which is some post-secondary ed, and they have fingerprinting. You get some benefits, which you might get to the CBA piece that Sam's talking about. And so during COVID, there was more than enough work to do. So that is the question that, if you are talking about costs you can control and maybe looking at that 6.1%
you want a firmer understanding of why are we buying these people, or why are we paying for these people? And the principals are here tonight for this very reason, to be able to come back and take this as a parking lot question and explain to you how this would be moving forward.
Because I think there's some question as, does it save on daily rate subs or, you know?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
know.
that's,
I'm
yeah,
just-
we'll let you know the rates and how we're proceeding with that. Yeah, yeah, and what, like you said, what do they do? Yeah.
And just to make sure that that was heard on the tech, what I wrote down as a question is, how does the new tech interact with the COPS grant? And, you know, is the, are we definitely spending on the COPS, can we roll it into the COPS grant, or, you know, all that kind of stuff, just how those two things work together.
And we're still determining what the final price of the COPS grant and if things can be rolled over. So there are still some things that are, you know, not, as we said, these are projected amounts right now as we work through the budget over the next 2 months. You know, what are we doing with our mechanical services contract? Are we going to, you know, approach it a little bit differently? We're looking at, as you said, the technology and some of the cameras. Will that pass the straight face test under the COPS grant? You know, is there sufficient money to do that? You know, is there money to put into a fuel reserve and maybe reduce that from the operating budget, not knowing that we don't know what that looks like? So there's quite a few things that we're still working on. As we move through the next few weeks, we should have a lot more information and how we can offset some of the increases is what we'll look at.
The technology question, I agree with too. I don't think a lot of us even know what she's referring to.
Okay, we'll get more
Security,
detail.
I mean, it's security, it's an
Right.
academic.
And I did not put that, so that's, you know, very fair to get more details on that. Megan will certainly be able to write up something and provide that for you next meeting.
So what was it gonna say? The other, this maybe is a clarifying question. So we did hear the presentation of the finance committee on adult ed. And in this presentation, it's flat. So the recommendation is that we keep it flat.
No, I put it estimated because we still are going to have that conversation at the next finance meeting.
Okay.
What we want to do. She has since presented me with a thorough budget. And so I have a little more information on that.
So that's
So
definitely.
I don't know that it's prime time yet to come back to the board. I think finance still needs to review that and make a recommendation if we feel that it's necessary to increase the local contribution.
Okay, so I think we should definitely have a conversation about that. at the next one.
Yep.
So I said, I appreciate you throwing that number. I mean, that's so, you don't know. Even so, we can know what it is.
Need to try to find that number.
Yeah.
It's a big number to try to find in your budget if you have to reduce other expenses and you just don't have the flexibility.
You can't
to
predict.
find, right? And that's still low. I mean, that's budgeting $3.20 a gallon for heating oil.
Yeah.
You know, right now, paying $2.14.
Are our lock-ins still being on?
This is, might be a clarifying question as well. One of the things I noticed, there's a note in the line item budget you sent around about 0.4 GT teacher with a $30,000 reduction. Is there something going on with it?
Just new staffing.
Okay,
Yeah, new staffing. There's no change in the one, it's total of 1.6 teachers.
okay.
There is no
So
change
the
in
amount of
that.
staff isn't changing.
No,
Just
no,
maybe
we had a
more.
retiree
Yeah.
and very high, so there's a significant savings. Yeah,
That was like a different change.
yeah, no, we're not changing that plan as far as I know.
Oh, no, no. We do need a 0.6 GT.
That's what I just said, right, yeah, so, yeah.
Right, I'm just, yeah. I
Yeah.
said, because I, in that line item, it was going down. And I was like, how's that possible? Those are all the ones that I wrote down. Other things that people had?
Definitely, at this point in time, we usually see reduce that show the staffing. And so that we can see what the ratios were of staff to projected students in each of the schools. That's something that we can see updated for next year.
I would say also, because the line item budget just came through half an hour ago, if people want to go through that, if you got, I don't know, 48 hours to add to the parking lot. You can't be hit, don't come with like 16 line item questions. But if you're looking through it over the next 48 hours or something, and it comes up with a parking lot question, send it through to me, and then I'll send it through to make sure everybody sees it.
Because usually we want to have consensus that we delve into that information. So I just want to make sure that it's vetted, that it's not a huge ask and that everybody wants that.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So, take a couple days to read it, because it is a big document, but don't save them up for the next workshop. We definitely have to.
Yeah, and hopefully the comments are helpful for you to alleviate some of the questions that you would think to ask on some of those lines, but.
Sure. This is a workshop, it's not a business meeting, so this is not a voting item. It will be a voting item at the next business meeting. But I did not want to wait. As you know, we've been conducting a principal search. And this principal search at the high school has been going on for basically 5-6 months since Ted left us holding the bag. I love Ted. He got a great opportunity. We did go through an extensive process. I want to thank especially all the teachers and staff who reviewed resumes and looked at application kits. We had, I want to say it was 10 candidates that made it to the review of their application stage. We brought 4 in for a full interview. In that interview, we had, let's see, at least we had 3 high school teachers. We had Jeff as an administrator. I was there, Cole was there, Craig was there. I would say that all 4 candidates were very strong. We had great conversations. All of them. One of the things that I definitely want to pass along to the board and the community as a whole is that all 4 of those candidates were talented and they really wanted to be here. They pitched themselves hard. They had very nice things to say about the school district. I mean, generally, you don't come in and apply for a job in the school district. They stink, but they had real reasons why they felt that we were respected around the state, and they had really nice things to say about the way that we do things that I really appreciated. It was good validation for the work we've done. They all had really thoughtful answers to the question sets that we had. So we interviewed those 4 candidates over the course of the day, and then we came back, we slept on it, came back the next day, went through the process of eliminating candidates, and then had a really long discussion about the candidate that we ended up deciding that we wanted, and that candidate was Sadie Grealish. Understanding is that Sadie has said that she wants the job, so hopefully that's not a surprise to you, Sadie.
Sadie, that's wonderful.
So-
Melissa will be so tickled.
But I really just want to say that, it was a really good process. Our process worked, identified the right candidate. I think everybody in the interview committee was thrilled that Sadie did rise to the top, and everybody's really excited about what we got going forward. does mean that we have to go find an assistant principal. So if anybody wants to volunteer for that search committee, by all means, raise your hand when that goes around. But we are, I do think we've really got a great set of administrators, as we've said a million times. And anybody who takes that assistant position is going to be lucky to have it. Mr. Andresen, I know, has no interest. I'm not kicking him out, but I'm pretty sure he wants to go back to doing what he was doing. So hopefully we can find somebody, talented who wants to participate in the great success story that we've got going on right here. I have no doubt about that. So congratulations, Steve. Two good stuff. We will have to vote to make that official at our April meeting, but I thought it was silly to make everybody wait 2 weeks. Unless anybody else has any other business, I'll adjourn this meeting and I'll see you again next Monday. All right, thanks, everybody. That's great. Thanks, everybody who's out on the Zoom. We appreciate you watching.